on Bryce. I'll just bring you up on that so that people on YouTube can hear you. We'll just do it that way. Anybody who's in here, we're having a conversation about the online Latinizing, quote unquote, controversy that I'm going to kind of like fully address for anybody who's in here. This is live on YouTube. So you don't have to listen on this if you don't want to. But it's kind of just going to be laying out like everything that's happened, right? At least from what I've experienced and what I've been told, whatnot. Because I'm really tired of people like kind of constantly asking me about it. And so I kind of just want to like, my Discord is blocked right now. That's crazy. I don't even think I have StreamYard still, bro. Hold on. Like, I'm pretty sure I got rid of that. Hold on. Let's see if I can run one real quick. Might have to accept my alts. Just join real quick on your alt. Let me know when you're in. I'll put you in. What's up, Noah? How you doing, man? Father Stephen DeYoung pops in out of nowhere. Yeah, dude. Waiting on Ricky to get up here because Rick knows a lot about this stuff. Dead stage. I haven't started anything yet, Abdul. I'm streaming right now. It's kind of just here just for the people who are conversating. I mean, people can sit in the stage if they want to, but I'm going to be going over as much of the history of the Latinizing online problem as possible. And talking about how all of it started and where I understand that, Abdul. Like, some people would categorize me that way too. That's why I want to talk about it. That's why I want to kind of like flesh all this out. Ice JJIV. Okay. All right, you should be good. There you go. Yo, what's up?
Yeah, this story is very interesting, so just keep going. I might add some stuff here
Yeah.
and there.
So one of the big things, right, that matters is understanding that there were people around the time of like Father John Romanides, especially in the Greek, right? Especially in the Greek fields and school, that were teaching things kind of in a more aggressively anti-Latin way. A way that wasn't exactly handled. Orthodoxy wasn't exactly handled that way prior to that. Okay. Obviously, yes, Orthodoxy is not Latin in terms of like being Roman Catholic. But in terms of a lot of the doctrines, you notice how a large portion of things that we argue about online right now, that we disagree on, there isn't a single father that talks about that issue with a Latin. Like, it's like in a lot of these things. Like, for example, original sin. There is no church father from the time of 1054 all the way up until about the time of Father Romanides that has any kind of dialogue with a Latin on, or an Augustinian on things like original sin. There was no arguments. There was no debate, right? They never fought about these things. And you think that if that would have been something that actually is a schism problem, if that's something that actually arises from, okay, look, first off, I'm gonna show both sides of this because I do heavily appreciate both sides to everything. All right, I am not somebody who's just like hardcore on one side, hardcore not on the other side. But I am going to say this right now. A large portion of this feels like a psyop. Like a large portion of like making things a problem when they're not actually a problem feels like a psyop half the time. Was originalist sin discussed at Florence? No, I don't think it was. I don't reckon that it was. It wasn't an issue. The only thing that was
You
really
know,
discussed at Florence that a lot of people don't really look at a lot is purgatory and leavened bread. But like St. Mark of Ephesus's writings against purgatory, like they weren't really used at Florence. Like it was a very, very small portion of it. They kind of like talked about it for like, I don't know, I think a couple hours or something. It was very small. But anyway,
and
a
by the
lot.
way,
Go
in
ahead.
his homilies on purgatory, he does mention original sin in passing, I think once, and he just like, and it's like in like granting the Latin view, and he doesn't like say anything and like specifically about original sin.
And here's something that I made as a short a while ago. Okay. That makes this confusing to some people. Because I've said this many times to people, and a lot of people look at me and they're like, "What do you mean by that, dude? Are you like, what do you mean by that?" If I say that I hold to Augustinian original sin, what I'm going to do a test in chat. If I say I hold to Augustinian original sin, what do you think that entails right now? If you don't already know, obviously, if you know, if you really, really know Augustine, then don't say anything. But if you haven't had the time to actually read Augustine, like a lot, what do you think the first thing you think about is when I say I hold to Augustinian original sin? Liability, okay. Unbaptized baby hell, born damned, yep. Limbo ninja, I don't know about that one. Personal guilt, yes. That's the one I was looking for. That specifically is the thing that I was looking for. At first glance, when I say I hold Augustinian original sin, a lot of people, they immediately say, "Oh, so you think we're personally guilty for Adam's sin?" Augustine never, I repeat, never said that. Not once in any of his works. He never made the claim that we're personally responsible for his sin. He says that we're naturally responsible for his sin. Those are entirely different entailments.
I mean, he straight up denies personal guilt.
In against
So,
Julian,
mhm.
he verbatimly states that we are not liable personally for Adam's sin in against Julian, which is one of his main works that are utilized by especially the Western Church for their understanding of original sin. I mean, that's one of the big ones, dude. That's one of his big works. That's like City of God level. That's like Confessions level. Against Julian's big. And the thing is there a different word used for guilt when it means liability and culpability? Well, so like here's the thing, like if I say that I'm liable for the sin of Adam, if I say something like that, right? Being liable just means that you have to deal with those consequences. You're owed those consequences, right? They are something that are being provided to you because of X, right? Yes, yeah, Frank, I see that. Yeah, yes, riatus. And so the guilt, right? The liability, right? If it's there's nothing wrong with saying that you're liable for Adam's sin on its surface, because it's not because you're personally liable, right? You're naturally liable. You possess a nature which is liable. You inherited that, which then causes you to fall into your own personal liability. The natural liability leads to the personal liability, but it's not required. It's not a necessary effect, right? I mean, obviously, like we'd say, like if you possess original sin, you're going to sin. You're going to commit a personal sin. But obviously, it's not technically a logical impossibility to not do so. But you know what I mean. He says multiple times, right, in these types of things. So anyway, now that I've kind of got all that out of the way, let me kind of explain what I was going to go with. Okay. Father Romanides wrote a work called The Ancestral Sin, where he makes it very clear that St. Augustine, that his theology and his soteriology was a different theology and a different soteriology than the rest of the church. And on the surface, right, if you haven't read a bunch of Augustine, right, you only read some of the quotations, right, which there's nothing wrong with that. All right. Like I do encourage everybody here to read Augustine. I'm always going to say that. All right. I'm not going to lie to you. Like people like Rick in here, people like DH is another guy that helped me with that. Even people like Autocratic, hilariously enough, because a lot of people like make jokes of how like militant Autocratic is against like Latinizers and whatnot. He was one of the first people to try to like convince me to like read him. Right. So like, I would always try to tell everybody, read Augustine. He has such good works. He has great refutations for apologetic purposes, great spiritual works, especially Confessions, right? Like, and it's weird because he also just feels the most relatable sometimes. I don't know if anybody else ever gets that vibe, but like, bro, he bounced back and forth so often, and like, he made a lot of mistakes, and he admits that. He's the only saint I know that has a book on retractions. That has a book where he says, yeah, I was wrong here. You know what I mean? But that also means something. That he also knows what he got wrong. Which is a great thing, you know? And yeah, I see that. His confessions are amazing. I mean, they're some of the best God-filled poetry I've ever read in my life. But anyway, the actual point of the matter. Okay, let me see if I can find some of the quotations here from the book. Okay. So he says this on page 30 in The Ancestral Sin. He says, for this precise reason, both factions believe indefensibly that the theme of guilt supposedly presented so clearly in Romans 5 is not developed in any other place in all of the Holy Scriptures and the works of the Fathers until Augustine dealt with it. This is why the West regarded Augustine as the first to penetrate and deeply comprehend the thought of the Apostle Paul. It is not so strange, therefore, that the Western theologians allude to the teaching of guilt as a possible special divine revelation to Paul. So then, I'm trying to see a very specific here. Escape the probability that rules within it.
Is that a Romanides quote or what?
That was a Romanides quote, yes.
Okay.
Because like the whole point that he's kind of trying to drive here is that original sin, right? It wasn't something that people didn't really have to deal with that until Augustine, because first off, original sin as a problem, or even in the heretics' views, right? The way the heresies that were arising from soteriological problems, which original sin would be like one of those things that people would try to attack. That the language used in the West, first off, was always far more legal. It was always far more judicial than the East. And so when these soteriological heresies arose, they arose in the West. That's the reason why you see the majority of the heresies being defeated in the West. They're mostly people that are holding soteriological heresies, like Jovinianism, Novatianism, right? Trying to remember. Pelagianism, Julianism, right? Like, there's like a lot of people don't know a ton about these heresies because like it's kind of like most people know the anti-Trinitarian heretics, right? Like, not a lot of people know the soteriological heretics because they held everything else correctly, but they had weird views on soteriology, bro.
Donatism could count as one
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah, it can. Donatism definitely could be one of those.
That is hyper legalism.
It is. But that's the thing, though, is that a lot of people, they try to create this weird barrier. This is kind of the main reason I wanted to bring this up. A lot of people try to make this weird barrier between the West and the East that doesn't actually exist in a lot of ways. And that barrier is language utilized to describe soteriology. Yes, I will agree there are very, very small nuanceful differences in soteriological problems depending on churches, okay? Like, I do believe that we do have some differences with the Roman Catholic Church and stuff like that. I do believe that we have some differences with the Protestants, especially on that. I mean, especially like old school Protestants like Presbyterians and whatnot. Definitely had differences with them on soteriology, okay? Calvin was a demon. We all get it, okay? But a large portion, a very, very large portion of the language utilized by these people in the Western world, especially even in the heretical times with the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation, all these things. Notice how that language still stayed in the West, right? That language stayed in the West. But if you look at the fathers of the East, past the schism, that's the best part. If you look at the church fathers who wrote from the year 1200 AD all the way until about 1870 AD, that's about the range of the Eastern Church where they get really in depth on a lot of unanswered questions. Because I'm not going to lie to you, Orthodoxy did not like answering questions until about 1275. They were real quiet after the schism. So if you go start at that time and, you go all the way up to like the 1800s, right? You read people that existed in this time. I literally would bet an entire paycheck on it. You can find any single father in this time frame at all, and they will use that legalistic language. Do you know why? Because that is the way that the scholastic method utilizes it. Because the scholastic method was something that was carried on from people like St. Photius, because St. Photius utilized things like that. Now, granted, I do believe that there's other ways to explain it. This is the reason why I'm saying I'm not all the way on the side of saying we should always be using it, blah, blah, blah. There were fathers that used different language. People like Saint Athanasius, for example, and I think also Saint Irenaeus. Instead of using language like legal, judicial style language, right? They used the language more of a disease or a sickness. These things weren't usually molded together. It's usually either you use the kind of like a disease or illness type language, or you use the legalistic, judicial language. But if they were one faith in that time, with those like St. Augustine, if they're the same faith as Augustine, in that same communion as Augustine, then here's where I kind of broke. This is something I asked myself. If these people were all in the same communion and supposedly there were fathers that were in the same faith, proclaiming things in a different way, in like a more legal, judicial way, but then there's some fathers in the pre-schism that maybe avoided it. If they're still declared in the same faith, is that not a language problem? Is that actually a theological issue now? It literally cannot be a theological issue unless you want to admit there are schools of thought in the pre-schism church that actually lead to different soteriological views. Meaning that the legal language and the judicial language that was used, especially by people like St. Augustine, St. Hilary, St. Ambrose, right, St. Fulgentius, most of the Western saints, all right, St. Isidore, St. Leo the Great, all of those people, they all use that type of language in Latin. If they are declared as the same faith as the Cappadocians, as St. Cyril of Alexandria, which people love to quote mine him. People love to quote mine St. John Chrysostom to try to support the anti-original sin crowd. If they were of the same, were they of the same faith or were they not? Because that matters. Because either they had the same soteriology or they didn't. Because soteriological heresies existed. And people were condemned for them. And they were thrown in the excommunication pit for holding to heresies that were only soteriological. So if this supposed substitutionary atonement language, or this original sin language was supposedly not you, or supposedly, I don't know, Latinizing in terms of like, changing orthodoxy to a new faith, then technically speaking, right, the fathers that use that kind of stuff, then they're condemned by proxy. Because then you have to kind of admit that their view leads to a different soteriology, right? Bryce about to tell us he's going west? No, absolutely not. Because even though that I do love the Western culture and I do love the overall, like, the vibe of like Western right stuff, no, absolutely not. Because I still 100% know in my heart that Orthodoxy is true on the key issues in every way. But I am saying that the fear, right? The fear of the Latino fron is very crazy, and it's a little much for a lot of people. And this also goes for the other side, because now here's where I'm going to turn the gears. Because now I want to kind of point the other way for a minute. Because of the fact that there were people that did not utilize this language, the same thing applies the other way, right? When they try to say, oh no, I'm not going to use that kind of language. And then they hold to you have to use the language of the Father, or like, you know what I mean? Or like they try to hold you into something, right? So this is kind of me talking about the more quote unquote Latinizer side. Now, the reason why you don't hear me just call people Latinizers anymore, you do quote unquote thing, is because that word Latinizer, first off, it's extremely slurry. Like if you look at people in the past that were called Latinizers, Bessarion is a Latinizer. Okay? They called him Latino Fron. That's the Latinizer. All right? Like John Bekos is a Latinizer. All right? People that literally turn Roman Catholic, basically, are Latinizers. These people that are purported as Latinizers, if you ask them what they think about the Filioque, I honestly believe they're more militant about it. They're more militant against it, right? There's things that they care about a lot, but that again, being said, is that when you, yes, Filioque and IC affirmers, ILI, that, right, that is a Latinizer. All right? People that are attempting to bring in something which is completely unnecessary to Orthodoxy and for the frontmen of the church. There is nothing against using the Western language in a general sense. What is a problem, and when things become actual quote unquote Latinizing, is when you bring in the filioque way, when you start trying to justify things like how Thomism can supposedly work with Orthodoxy. That's a big one. If you try to hold the Immaculate Conception, if you try to hold to Sacred Heart theology, imaginative prayer, right? There's very specific things that we clearly disagree on with the Roman Catholic Church. And if you try to bring those things in just on account of the fact that someone hasn't specifically condemned it yet, that is a whole nother problem. That's a completely different issue than the people, right, that call it, that the ones that like to throw the word Latinizer around. All right. It's kind of like how, let me put it like this. It's kind of like how the word heretic is like a buzzword now. Like, do you know how harsh that word was pre-schism? I mean, do you know how like insane it was to be called something like that? Like, that's like the N word with like 5 hard R's, bro, back then. Like, that's what heretic meant back then. Nowadays, any dude on TikTok is just throwing that around. They just be like, you a heretic, bro. Like, dude, you a heretic, man. Everybody just slinging slurs, man. They're slinging Christian slurs around. 5 hard R's. Yes, correct. Is Bryce saying that he's repeating a word that's worse than the hard R? Yes. Heretic. Historically speaking, that word is worse than pretty much any slur you can think of. That word, if you were labeled that, you're getting killed, bro. You're dying. You're either getting excommunicated, exiled, or dead or killed. If you get called that. Nowadays, people just be saying that shit. They just be calling every single person a heretic. And the same thing applies nowadays with this Latinizer title, in my opinion. It's thrown around way too loosely. You know, I got called a Latinizer one time. And it was crazy too, because like people don't normally call me a Latinizer, and I also thought that I've always thought that's a little weird, because I use most of the same language that a lot of these guys that have been canceled use. But maybe it's just because I'm more parsimonious and more charitable. Maybe that's what it is. You know what I mean? I think that's what it is, Rick.
I think so.
I'm just nicer to everybody. See, I'm the evil Jay Dyer because I'm actually really nice to everybody. But anyway, the I use the same language, right? Like, and it's based on the situation. It's based on who I'm talking to, right? If I'm trying to get somebody to come to Orthodoxy, and they, for example, the reason why that they're rocking away from Calvinism is because of PSA, maybe I will attempt to use Christus Victor style understanding or recapitulation, right? Because it is true. That stuff is still true. That's the thing, is that you can talk about substitutionary atonement, but that doesn't negate things like recapitulation. Those things don't just, they're not negated because of the fact that you hold to substitutionary atonement. It doesn't automatically then make it to where basically God is not still recapitulating humanity, right? It doesn't automatically mean that Christus Victor is not true. And it's funny too, because a lot of the claims from the I hate like I don't like the Latin stuff side, they'll say like oh, we don't affirm PSA, that's a Protestant doctrine or that's a Western doctrine, right? And then we'll say, oh, well, we hold the Christus Victor. Do you know who invented Christus Victor, bro?
Lutheran.
Luther made that. Luther invented that word.
I mean, it was a Lutheran theologian that like has his book on Christus Victor, but I don't know if it was Martin Luther.
Well, it was a Lutheran.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact. It was a Lutheran, right, that made that. But people will go around all the time saying like, "Oh no, we hold to the Christus Victor model." Hey, brother, it's the same. It came from the same shit, man. Because like both of them are not entirely wrong. Some of them just go a little bit too far on it sometimes. Sometimes people go a little bit too far with PSA. You look at some of the later reformers on PSA, and they'll straight up say that the Son ontologically disconnected from the Father when he was in hell.
Oof.
Ask a single Latinizer, Orthodox Christian, ask a single one if they believe that. I bet you money none of them would say that, ever. Because they don't believe that. They believe it's an analogy, like the psychological analogy. It's just an analogy. It doesn't actually denote any kind of ontology in God. I don't even think the Roman Catholics would agree with that. That's the funny part. I don't know, maybe Jake can correct me in chat, but I don't think they believe that the Son was actually separated from the Father, or that he was separated from the Father in hell in some way, shape, or form to where he had to feel the wrath in that manner. Right? There's different ways that it's seen. Economic atonement is just a superior and more based name. I think it's good for discourse. I liked Craig Truglia's video, but I also understand kind of like the people that try to use different things, right? But I do believe that economic atonement is a great term to use, even though that it's, I mean, it is, in a sense, legitimately used by some of our councils as an actual word. So that's cool, right? But maybe because you don't call our bishops and metropolitans heretics. Maybe. That probably matters as well, maybe.
That does matter a lot.
That does matter. And that right there is one of the things that, you know, and I've talked with a lot of the guys that are on the, I'm going to call them Blacker Knights, okay? Because I don't like using the Latinizer thing again, because I'm trying to, I'm trying to just not like just create these big ass barriers like that. I'm going to create Discord server barriers. All right? Because this originated as an actual online controversy from the difference between Direcord, right, and Blackernay, the Council of Blackernay server. That's kind of like where the big separation thing happened, where they started creating these huge distinctions. The Ananda Dyer Mog edit and started cracking. I've got to see that, bro. Please, if you know where that is, please send that to. That's funny. Yeah, stuff like that, bro. Like, that stuff is just dumb. Like, that's just so dumb. On either side, that's so dumb. But Blacker Knights, one of the issues that they had, and it's one of the reasons why there was a lot of bad blood and hatred that was developed, is because they were kind of the ones at the beginning to throw the word heretic around very loosely in a very rough way.
I can expand on
Go
a
ahead.
little on that. So it was more than just saying that, because yeah, it was about a bishop, right? This bishop is in material heresy. And and an announcement was made, if anyone believes in this, you know, you're a heretic, you have to repent. It's those types of things that when you take them to like a Discord with more than 1,000 people and just announce it all of a sudden, and people probably lack a lot of context, it just seems kind of crazy, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it creates a sectarian. It creates a sectarian mindset, right?
Yeah.
And and this issue, in my opinion, and I don't give spiritual advice, but I will say this, is that this has the spirit of sectarianism written all over it. Like, clear as day. It's all over this. That the devil is utilizing this in some way to try to make it to where the Orthodox churches don't, or not even really, I guess, honestly, today's patriarchs, today's bishops, I have no idea. All right, I don't really read modern patriarchs and bishops' encyclicals or their theological treatises. There's not a lot of that going on right now. I'm just being real.
Bro, you haven't read Bartholomew on why you should protect the environment? Come on.
Yeah, I haven't read On the Environment by Patriarch Bartholomew, no. Sabo just dropped a letter? I'll have to read that. I heard that some of the Blacker Knights got mad at that one.
Sabo letter.
Metropolitan Saba. Or not that letter specifically, but there was a letter that he wrote recently that apparently some of the Blacker Knights didn't enjoy because he like condemned PSA in a way or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, he said something about I think it was satisfaction.
Oh yeah. He rejected satisfaction theory of Anselm, and this like created some controversies with some of my friends. It was really bad because like like I think I'm still formally under Metropolitan Saba, right?
Oh, you
And
said you were with the Serbs now, no?
yeah, I go to Serbian parish now. It's like
Nice.
5 minutes from my house. The Antiochian church that I was going to is about 35 minutes away from my new house, so it just kind of makes more sense.
Mm.
And I already kind of like told the church about that and started my moving, but I haven't been able to have like a really good formal sit down with the priest yet, there, Father Sasha. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a whole process, switching jurisdictions.
yeah, the Greeks are so ecumenist, like not gonna lie. That's the thing is that like there's different jurisdictions have different views on certain things, especially when it comes to the way that they treat people outside the church, right? The way that they baptize. You can see that. So there is differences. I would say that that's Orthodoxy's version of the Roman Catholics having different schools of thought in philosophy. Where there's some views that like the majority of the church would go, "Yeah, I don't know about that one, chief." But there is a group of people that still hold to it and they're not formally condemned for it. So then therefore it's kind of like a up in the wind situation. This happens this happens in the Roman Catholic Church all the time. Do you know how often you see things like Scotists, for example? I mean, I can't even tell you how many people that follow Thomas Aquinas that have said that Scotists are like literally heretics for believing
Yeah.
in their understanding of EED or believing in univocity of being and things like that. I mean, when you think about it too, right? The difference between analogy of being and univocity of being are extremely different in the entailments, right? Because like univocity of being entails some kind of entails that God is a genus. I mean, Thomas would freaking flip their lid. But that I think is where Orthodoxy kind of suffers from something like that. Is different patriarchates having different views on like things like ecumenism, or having different views on things like uh, entrance into the church, right? Because that is where we differ. That is one of the things that the Roman Catholic Church has a little bit more fleshed out. We have more of the philosophical side fleshed out in terms of having it as one singular system. Because you know how, like, technically speaking, we don't say that we're Palamites because there's no such thing as a Palamite versus a blah, blah, blah. There's no other person. So calling it Palamism doesn't make sense, right? Palamism as a belief, that's an academia. That's an academia title. That's not a church title. Especially because, like, even after the time of St. Gregory Palamas, they just called us the Greeks or the Greco-Russians. They like to call us that a lot. Father Juji calls us Greco-Russians.
Mhm.
which is quite funny. So like, but then and you can even see this in our fathers. Like even in our post-schism fathers, like if you look at people like Eugenius Vulgaris, he was one of our really good theologians in the 1700s. He wrote multiple things within his work called De Deo Uno, or On the One God. And in multiple different sections, he doesn't refute the quote unquote Roman Catholic position, because there's not one for like these specific issues. He refutes the Thomist position on this. He refutes the Scotist position on this. He refutes the Suarezian position on this, right? He even quotes Jesuits in his works to support his position, because a lot of Jesuits had a lot more of our understanding of EED when it came to the participation of the Taboric light, right? Because we wouldn't say that we have the same understanding of participation in like the Transfiguration as Scotus does, even though that we have almost the same understanding of EED completely. But there's still a distinction there, because he has a different understanding of participation than we do. So there's still differences. There's still those things that exist. But our different patriarchates have different understandings of things like ecumenism, baptismal entrance, things like that. And the problem is the spirit of sectarianism in this type of situation, where people will basically come in and see the Greeks do something, or the Antiochians announce something, and because of the fact they're part of ROCOR, the epic based in trad ROCOR, right? And they'll be like, well, the patriarch Kirill would never, right? Like that type of shit, dude. Patriarch Kirill would never be okay with this. Russian Orthodoxy, bro. Right? Like that type of shit, man. Do you ever think we'll get a Dyer versus Agan debate? No. Dyer doesn't focus on Christology near enough to do that. And that's not because I think Dyer couldn't do it. It's just Dyer doesn't really care too much about the Oriental Orthodox. It's not really something that he's too concerned about in today's world right now with apologetics.
I mean, what kind of apologetics does he even do nowadays? Like atheism mostly?
Atheism and papacy shit. He's mostly doing geopolitics right now, especially because, politics are going a little bonkers right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. I mean, that's what he started out doing anyway. Apologetics has kind of always been a slight secondary to what he originally was doing anyway. David Erhan versus Agan. I don't know how that'd go. I honestly have no idea. See, what I would like to see, but I know that Abdul would never do it, is I'd like to see Abdul go against Agan, and I would totally host that shit.
Can I be heard?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would never debate that dishonest kid. It's a waste of time.
Well, fair
Kid
enough.
is so dishonest. I'm sorry. Like I would rather talk to Metaphysics Mike than speak to Agan. He's just dishonest. Like I don't understand. Like when it's something from a father.
From what I'm hearing is you're running.
Dude, oh my goodness, can we drop this freaking idiot child, bro? God, bye. Thank goodness. When it's something that contradicts his position, he just retranslates it. But when it's something that fits his position, he'll leave the translation fine. That's so dishonest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll also hold to the strict interpretation or the strict translation that he has that supports him as well. So nobody else is allowed to retranslate it.
Yeah, no, literally. If it's something that's mistranslated by a so-called theologian, because the theologian translation nowadays are so terrible, because they try to translate it to make it easier for the readers that don't understand these concepts. Who gives a damn about that? Translates the Father's right. Like, what's his name? Joseph Farrell, in his, I think his third Apostolium of Saint Maximus, he just adds Saint Maximus saying Christ is in two beings. Just adds it. Nowhere does it say it in the.
What's the issue?
First, say what's the issue? Well, all right, say hi in the story for me.
But yeah, Craig is too nice. I will admit that. Solo. Craig is he's really good at what he does, and he's very good at his studies. But when he debates, bro, like he's so nonchalant.
Craig,
like, yeah.
Oh no, he got absolutely mopped by Egan. I won't even lie. I won't be dishonest. He doesn't know nothing about this concepts. Like he's good. Like he's all right. He's like Erhan to me. Erhan is basic in Christology. Like it's good. Like it's good for beginners. But no, he got walked by Egan. The fact that he could not respond to the second letter to Sixensis is just like that was terrible. Because then Egan just kept on quoting it, and he had no response to it.
No, not just quoting. He was reciting it. So even those who say two natures subsist inseparably is an attack upon like.
Yeah, he was.
I low-key want to see Maximus the Chalcedonian versus Egan.
He won't.
They were supposed to.
I've noticed that most of the high tier. I've noticed that most of the high tier like Diophysite debaters, they usually don't like actually want to associate with debating Egan.
He's dishonest. He's a waste of time, bro. You remember your live when he just couldn't let Kata speak.
Oh, that was fire.
Kata could not even say, "Oh my goodness, bro!" I was getting so angry, bro.
Yeah, I think that was actually
talking. Everybody went on mute. Everybody went on mute when he was talking. We all let him get his 2 minutes of just saying utter nonsense. Kata stopped talking, cuts him off. My dude.
Yeah, I think that moment was like when we saw the peak of Egan, and afterwards he just like devolved into grammatical argumentation. So like, what's the sentence object? What's going to be the inference for the like?
I love that.
He just switched up completely.
Hey, Kata, what's the semantic range of what you're talking about, bro?
Yeah. Wonderful.
Bro, Kata, you do the same thing when talking to Filioquist. What are you yapping about?
Yeah, but it's cool when I do it.
I just like to knowledge gap people when I don't know what I'm doing, bro. You know what I'm saying? Hit him with random big words.
And like the fact that he only got popular from that change argument.
Oh, what was the Battlefield Live? What was that called? Yeah, I called it Dr. Doom's Battle Planet Live. That was what I called that.
That's the argument that he got famous for, because people, he just sophists himself. When somebody gives him an adequate response, it's like me saying, oh, you believe Christ changed because he went from not being incarnated and incarnated. What the hell?
I mean, doesn't his own saint say that? Like the exact thing that he's arguing against?
Severus of Antioch literally said Christ went from simple to composite. Verbatim. But no, when Severus says it, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah, but you know what they never do? They never try to like give an explanation of their own position. It's always like attack.
Oh my goodness. I think mainly the reason is that they come up seeming like they're on good faith. So then when you try to ask a question, they'll be like, oh, you're running. Well, dude, I just gave an answer. You may not like it. I don't care. What's the refutation? Like when I was debating Kyrillos, he changes his name all the time. But he's one of the Eganites. He's a friend of mine. Like I've known him for a while. He verbatim says that Christ went from non-being into being. I was like, so you're Christ is a creature to you. He's like, what's the problem? I was like, what do you mean? What's the problem? You're a freaking Aryan. Forget Aryan.
Hey,
You believe
get
in.
Jonathan Hill for that, bro. He's been literally going on Twitter saying that Christ is a creature.
Bro,
Yeah, no,
I
that's
have it on
blasphemy.
my screen
Absolute
right
blasphemy.
now. Christ is created.
Now, okay, look, you can
In
say
so
Christ
far
is
as
created. You can. You can't say you cannot say he's a creature, but you can say he's created according to his humanity. Saying Athanasius says this.
Yeah, he does. I mean,
but
DH posted a
You
St.
cannot call him
Gregory
a-
theologian quote saying it as well.
But anyway, back to the original thing that I was talking about. So, yo, can you mute Abdul? Mike's going crazy. So the original topic, I get to that still. You can see obviously like some of the theologians or people that are professing theology that come out of these different fields in Orthodoxy, right? Even prior to this online issue existing, right? You could see people, like I said, like Father John Romanides. You can see people like there's a priest. It's like Father George something. Rick, you know who it is.
Florovsky?
Yes. George Florovsky. Right. You can see that there were a decent amount of people that were coming out of different areas and supporting certain positions at a certain time. The issue is that this argumentation, this type of argumentation, right, of us supposedly having distinct ways of speaking, like the difference between people saying, I reject Augustinian original sin, and then other people on the other side saying, I affirm Augustinian original sin. If you literally ask the people most of the time, I'm not going to say every time, okay? But most of the time, when you ask the people, can you define Augustinian original sin? I want you to steel man what he said. They'll say, oh, well, he believes in personal guilt. And you're just like, wow. I didn't mean, can you tell me what the reformers thought of Augustine? I said, can you tell me what Augustine said? They're distinct. And that's kind of where the issue arose, is the way, like, dude, if Calvinists never existed, I don't think this ever would have become a thing. Like, that's my conspiracy theory. That's my schizo post of the day. If Calvinists never became a thing, if Augustinian butchers, if the butchers of Augustinian theology never became a thing, this would have never, I think, been an issue. Because even people like Father John Romanides, who a lot of people attribute to as somebody who hates Augustine, right? He, every time that he talks about Augustinian quote unquote doctrine, he always says that, no, this is actually something that arose in Anselm. This is something that actually arose in Calvin or something like that, right? Most of the time when he's arguing against the Augustinian theology that he believes, he's not actually arguing against Augustine's position. He's arguing against the Reformers' position after Calvin. Because honestly, I think it's even debatable that Calvin believed that. I don't even know if Calvin believed that. I don't know. I've read the Institutions. Like, I don't even know if he believes that. So it kind of depends. Like, I actually was quoting that. Where is it at?
The thing with Protestantism is that you can like say that someone believes this that is terribly wrong, and you're probably right. Like somebody does believe that, maybe not the person that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So you do like successfully refute someone, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like, he is refuting certain heresies, like personal guilt. The way that he's refuting it is a problem. But the thing is that that's not actually Augustine's own position.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff also goes to like for like PSA when it comes to a lot of this kind of stuff. Atonement argumentation, atonement language, satisfaction language, things like that, right? You notice, this is something that I always quote, like, or this is something that I always say about this kind of stuff too, is you look at the Calvin, or actually no, best example of this, Council of Jerusalem 1672 or 5, yeah, 72.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Was that council the condemnation and refutation of Calvinist dogma?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why was PSA not one of those things that was refuted?
Because it's just like implied that it's condemned.
Okay.
It's just an axiom.
That's my entire. So that's one of the things that I say about this kind of problem. You look at certain councils that refute certain heretics. You look at the things that they disagree with that heretic. They don't literally just say everything you say is false. Nobody says that to a heretic.
I do, and Saint Cyril says that.
Okay, bro. Whatever.
So you think what's it called? John Becko's got something right? You heretic.
Yeah, he believed Jesus was God.
Forgery.
No,
Show
he
me that.
didn't.
Right. So heretics can have positions
Running.
that. Okay. Heretics can have positions, right, that are correct in certain fields. And this is actually shown at the Council of Ephesus. You look at the Nestorian Creed. Notice how this is actually something I love to do regarding the filioque.
Aquinas said it was condemned, so it was condemned.
All right, bro. If you're going to keep trolling, I'm going to boot your ass out of this call. So this is my point for this. We'll use Ephesus as an example. Okay? When you look at the Nestorian Creed and you look at certain sections of the creed, you notice that St. Cyril's refutations of the Nestorian Creed, it skips over a lot of it. Because a lot of it is not a problem. Like, for example, where he says that the Holy Spirit does not come from the Son. You notice how St. Cyril did not reject that part. He did not refute that part.
He was just silent on it.
Bro, Abdul, you're killing me, man. You're confusing the shit out of people right now.
I'm just quoting this was the Latin say.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, say this is what the Latins say then.
Abdul is like a real Latinizer.
Yeah, he is.
True.
I don't have to react to Calvin's shopping list. Correct. You don't have to read Calvin's shopping list. But anyway, there is things, obviously, of the way that Calvin portrays PSA that leads to problems. And that's because he had a different understanding of the Trinity in a way. Very subtly. It wasn't huge. Because the whole view of the Son ontologically separating from the Father so that the Son felt the wrath in that manner, that's something that the later reformers would believe, not the earlier ones. But that's because they get their things from Calvin and then they have to interpret Calvin and then, W interpretation, I guess. But that's how that goes. And the problem is that you see people like that. And then over time, those are the people that everyone points at and goes, this guy's the problem in the West. And then people also point back and say, Augustine started all of this. It's Augustine's fault. It's all because of the tome of Leo, bro. You know what I mean? Like, people will point back to like the earliest like renditions of like someone's argumentation, and then they'll condemn the origin point instead of the person in their current state, right? Like the later reformers. And so that's one of the things that me personally, I believe that Father Romanides failed on. He confused Augustine's theology with the later reformers. And that's just from, I've read like 5 different works from him at this point. I've read his dogmatic theology, right? I've read the ancestral sin. I've read the sickness of religion. I'm trying to remember the other ones. He also has a work that's basically just
dogmatics.
empirical dogmatics. Right. Empirical dogmatics is also just kind of like a bunch of shit put together. It's not even really like an actual work. Technically. It's just like a bunch of stuff that he said over time put together. But yeah.
You know about scholasticism, so you know that there's like at least like maybe a dozen ways to interpret Augustine's soteriology and views of predestination.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of them like they are more extreme than others. Some of them are even like compatible with Orthodoxy and with the Scythians. And I think it's just really easy to attack like the one that you think is the worst sounding one and make that the representative of Augustine's thought and just like run with it. I think it's pretty easy.
Yeah. And
Hey, Bryce,
yeah.
what's your view on unconditional election?
I'm agnostic. I haven't studied it.
What about total depravity?
I don't believe that. I think that's impossible in our view. You have to be monergistic to hold to that.
So, which of the 5 points of tulip do you say you would hold to, or do you reject all, or are you agnostic to some?
Well, I reject total depravity because that denies synergy. I don't know how I feel about unconditional election. I haven't read anything on it. What is the L? I don't remember.
Limited atonement.
Limited atonement. What is that? That Christ basically only died on the cross for this for the saved or whatever.
Yeah, kind of.
I don't know about that one. That kind of goes. I think that goes completely against recapitulation. So I would say that I don't like that.
I mean, the thing for all these is that there's like different versions of all of them.
Yeah.
So it's like it's kind of the same, like not like caricature, but it's like there is nuance, just like anything else.
Yeah. I is the irresistible grace. If you're only referring to that insofar as the first grace of being given life, then sure. But I know that's not what they believe, so I deny. If you're talking, and then perseverance of the saints is just that, isn't it just that God is going to make sure that the elect don't fall away or some shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I have no idea how I feel about that. I haven't studied the fathers on that.
I mean, the thing with like perseverance has also to do with the fact that, you know, once you are saved and like irresistible grace like makes you have faith, then there's no turning back from that. But since we hold to baptismal regeneration, even in infants who don't have faith, then there can be people that at one point they are saved, but then they're not.
Yeah.
So that like completely kind of undercuts a notion.
Well, there are some people who obviously believe that like the elect can fall away for a period of time, but the idea is that they will always essentially come back, which isn't necessarily something that we would disagree with per se. But
I mean, I guess
I don't know.
I guess put it like this.
There's a reason
right?
why.
Well, I think it has to do with this, right? Whether or not that God has actually determined that they will come back versus God knowing that they're going to come back, so then therefore they necessarily come back. I think that's different. I think that would be two different views of, I guess, perseverance, right? Because like the Calvinists, it's because they're more bruh, I'm having a stroke. Monergistic. Abdul, shut up. Abdul, shut up. I saw you about to unmute. Shut the hell up.
I'll talk.
I knew you were gonna say some stupid shit as soon as I stuttered. I'm sorry. Because they're more monergistic, right? It kind of entails more that the reasoning behind why they come back is because of the irresistible grace, right? Or because of the fact that basically they're part of the limited atonement, right? Because they're unconditionally elected, because of the fact that they are, or because of the fact that they've been shielded from the total depravity by being chosen. Right, like all of these things kind of like web together in their view, right? Kind of like Danny Town actually in YouTube chat. Yeah, he just said they all presuppose each other in some sense, right? They do. And so like it's kind of a different entailment. Like I could say that I hold to the perseverance of the saints insofar as that God knows that the elect are obviously not going to fall away because he has the knowledge of them not falling away, blah, 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 boom. But that also has to do with the logical priority of what's in God's mind versus what's in God's decree. There's actually a debate that I had with a Presbyterian recently, a Calvinist, where we basically were talking about the logical priority of whether or not the decree is before the will. And he believes that God's decree is prior to the will logically. So basically the content of the will is due to the decree rather than the other way around. In our view, it's the other way around. In our view, it's the will determines the decree. And so then the knowledge, right, it would be knowledge, will, decree. Synergy with knowledge and will. The Calvinists have it backwards, completely backwards. They have it as foreknowledge, they have it as decree, will, and foreknowledge. So basically the foreknowledge, what he knows is what he decrees, rather than saying it the other way around. Where you say that he decrees what he knows, or he decrees what he wills from what he knows, right? We would say something like that. The Calvinists would say it completely backwards to that. And that obviously leads to a bunch of issues. Like I don't usually run this argument, but as soon as he said that, I ran the aloneness argument. I was like, oh, bro, you're cooked. I'm about to freaking make you say that God changes. Because that's why I use the aloneness argument. The aloneness argument